Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt live inside the Beltway on this Thursday, September 30th, in the year of our Lord 2021. I'm here to tell you that high schools all across the land have bad musicals every year. Now, they're not awful. Some are actually pretty good, but most of them are pretty bad. Some of them are terrible. There's a bell curve of high school musicals. But they usually feature one or two people who are overacting extremely well, one or two people whose voices don't quite reach the level you need for Broadway or even dinner theater at the local summer playhouse. They're just high school musicals, and they're fun, and they're good, and they're done by high school kids. And they'll never go down as great drama or great theater. We have our version of that inside the Beltway this week. Now, whether you're listening to me in Washington State or the tip of Florida, whether you're in San Diego and waking up early in America's finest city, or up in Maine, driving around the wonderful streets of Portland or Nashua or Manchester, today is Theater Day in D.C. We have a lot of theater going on. In the Financial Times, we have the headline, Joe Biden locked in precarious talks to save landmark legislation. In the New York Times, Democrats move to avert shutdown, but divisions imperil Biden's agenda. Then in the Washington Post, Biden and Pelosi embark on late scramble to save trillion-dollar infrastructure bill. A second headline in the Washington Post, Biden sticks to his deal-making strategy, as some Democrats want him to do more to bring holdouts on board. Then finally from the Wall Street Journal, infrastructure bill's fate uncertain, headed into planned House vote. Okay, here's what's going to happen. The squad is going to roll over. AOC and her three buddies are going to cry on the floor. They're going to get private assurances that next week the $3.5 trillion will pass. It's all pantomime. It's a giant game of charades. The Democrats never fall apart. They're going to win. Inflation is going to win. You are going to lose. Next week, they will roll over Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin and Maggie Hassan in New Hampshire, and Mark Kelly in Arizona, and Cortez Masto in Nevada, and Raphael Warnock in Georgia. All of them will roll over as well, and another $3.5 trillion. By the end of the week, $7 trillion will have been, this time next week, $7 trillion spent. On top of the $2 trillion earlier this year, $9 trillion. And on top of all of that, last year's COVID relief passed by a bipartisan measure. There's going to be so much inflation. Well, let me do the financial report early. Let me brought to you by Birch Gold. Every single day I tell you what's happening in the markets. Yesterday, the Dow went up 90 points. The NASDAQ went down 30 as they churn around on the thinnest of hopes that the Democrats will not drive the fiscal sanity of the United States over a cliff. The pretty thin hope. The 10-year Treasury jumped up to 1.54% because they know as soon as one or both of these bills pass, inflationary pressures will go through the ceiling, and everything you've been paying for is going to go up 5, 10%. Gas is going to skyrocket. Gold is at 1730. Began its march north yesterday, I believe, at 1,730. If you want to buy some gold, just the billion. Or you want to buy American Eagles or Maple Leafs, send my name Hugh, H-U-G-H, to 474747, or visit Hugh Gold. That's the way to do it. That's the best way to lay in against the winter that is coming to the value of your savings. If you've got money sitting in a money market account, not going to work. You're going to have to find some investments. I use mutual funds, growth funds. I use Amazon, real estate, diversify, and gold. Why? Because the dollar, if they print as many as they plan to print this week and next, it ain't going to be worth what it used to be. Now, that's the big story of the day. That's the market update. Mark Davis is sitting in for me tomorrow. He'll bring you the big dramatic conclusion that they spent $5 trillion. Or at least they spent the first $1.5 trillion of it, the infrastructure bill. Nancy Pelosi promised today She doesn't have the votes unless the squad goes along. The squad will roll over and they'll cry softly in the corner and pretend like they always do. They're never going to win the spelling bee, that gang. You know, I should send them the new Enemy at the Gates. You've heard Kyle Mills on this show. It's the #1 bestseller, Mitch Rapp novel. It would cheer them up. It would cheer them up. It would have a good guy winning. They think they're the good gals and they think they're losing. And they're not losing. They're helping Nancy Pelosi cement her, quote, legacy, which will be forgotten as soon as the doors on the chamber close. The vanity of Washington, D.C. is really immense. You know who John Chancellor is? Of course you don't. John Chancellor was the biggest guy in news 40 years ago. The clock marches on. Everybody forgets everything. Even the people who get buildings named for him. Rayburn. You know who Rayburn is? Of course you don't know who Rayburn is. He was the Nancy Pelosi of his day. You might get a building, but nobody knows who you are. It's all vanity. I wish they would just leave us alone. Now, the important stuff that happened over the last 2 days happened in the Senate and the House. And I have been waiting to play for you the key takeaways. And I want to start with Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin talking about what were we supposed to be doing in Afghanistan, preventing a terror attack in the United States. What have we done? Cut number 1.
Now, terrorist organizations seek ungoverned spaces so that they can train and equip and thrive. And so there is clearly a possibility that can happen here going forward. Our goal is to maintain a laser-like focus on this so that it doesn't happen.
All right, laser-like focus doesn't happen over the horizon. Sure. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Mark Milley, responding to Elise Stefanik from New York, said, here's what you have to know about terrorism, cut number 2.
Right this minute, it is lesser than it was in 9/11. However, I think the conditions are set or could be set, and I testified to this yesterday, I say it again, I've said it in public many times. The conditions could be set for a reconstitution of al-Qaeda and or ISIS. And I gave some specific times in my statement, and I stand by those. I think that it's a real possibility in a not-too-distant future, 6, 12, 18, 24, 36 months, that kind of time frame, for reconstitution of al-Qaeda or ISIS, and it's our job now, under different conditions, but it's our job to continue to protect American citizens against attacks from Afghanistan.
You get that? 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, 36 months. Al-Qaeda attacking us from Afghanistan. That would be during the Joe Biden years. General Milley continued talking about how the Taliban takeover has been a boon to morale among the terrorists. Cut number 3.
I think the Taliban sitting in Kabul significantly emboldens the radical jihadi movement globally. The analogy I've used with many others is it likely will put a shot of adrenaline into their arm. Their grandfathers defeated the Soviet Union in the war in Afghanistan many, many years ago, and they are taking this on their own networks right now and declaring it a major victory. So I think it's a big morale boost.
Of course it is. They beat the United States. We ran away. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin was in a Q&A with Austin Scott, congressman from Texas, about the status of Afghan pilots who fled that country a month ago. Cut number 4.
And there are 145 Afghan Air Force personnel in Tajikistan. They flew 16 aircraft into that country on August the 13th. It's now September the 29th. We need to get them out of Tajikistan. These are people who trained with us, they fought with us, that they did everything that we asked of them. And we have gotten no assistance at all from the State Department to move them. And I'm asking all three of you for your help in addressing the issue. Secretary Austin, we need the help.
Acknowledged, sir, and we will get with State right away to see if we can move this forward. I share your concern.
I would say a prayer for those Afghan pilots, because we will get with State right away, is what they've been saying to all the American citizens, the LPRs, the green card holders, the SIV eligible. They've been telling them that for months, and then nothing happens. This is the 1-month anniversary of our bug out, September 30th, and the Taliban are killing people every day. You want to find out anything that anyone has said about Afghanistan, head over to my search engine widget at HughHewitt.com, type in Afghanistan. You'll find conversations with David Petraeus and Stanley McChrystal. You'll find conversations with George W. Bush and Dick Cheney. Afghanistan has always been front and center on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Right now, we're just looking at the remains of the day and the defeat that we've suffered. But I'll come back and fill you in with more of what General Milley and General McKenzie and Secretary Austin had to say yesterday when we return to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, joined from Israel by Dr. Michael Oren, former ambassador of Israel to the United States, former deputy minister in the government. Good morning, Michael Oren. Welcome back to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
It's so good to be back, Hugh. How are you?
Good. This week, Naftali Bennett went to the UN and he said, basically, Iran has reached breakout moment. And he said words will not stop Iran. What's the message there, Dr. Oren? Is he saying the attack on Iran is coming?
Well, he buried that line. I looked; it was at minute 18 of a 25-minute speech. But he said it. He said words alone will not stop centrifuges. I wish he had said it up front. I wish he had said it like 50 times over in a true Churchillian manner. But the answer is yes. The fact of the matter is, Israel cannot coexist with a nuclear-armed Iran, and Israel can't even coexist with a threshold Iran that could decide within a day to make a bomb within 3 days. Now, the United States probably can. Russia, China can, but we can't because Hezbollah attacks us tomorrow with 100,000 rockets. We've got to go and engage southern Lebanon. We can't be in a situation where we're going to have a nuclear weapon to our head. That's what it's about. It completely erases our maneuverability. And so we can't coexist with it. And if they make that move, and I've gone on record saying they could make that move in the winter when the weather is bad and our Air Force can't be as effective, and the world is going to be preoccupied with corona, we're going to have to act.
I think they'll make that move during the Olympics because they're going to count on restraint by the Israeli government during the Olympics. But they will reach breakout. They will reach breakout.
If you don't mind.
Go,
point.
Please do. That's everyone.
I hadn't thought of that.
It's when dictators do stuff during the Olympics. Remember Putin and Ukraine. So tell me, Dr. Oren, how much will it take to reduce their ability to degrade it? You don't have to destroy Iran. You don't have to topple the regime. You just have to degrade their nuclear weapons enrichment capacity. Do you have any idea what it will take?
I have an idea. I'd rather not go into details about it. Israel does not have the capabilities that the United States has. We've talked about it several times on this program. We wish we had. We do not have strategic bombers, but we have other means. And I think that we could set back this program significantly. Keep in mind, historically, empirically, there have been two hostile nuclear programs in the Middle East. And we were probably the targets of those nuclear programs, one in Syria, one in Iraq. Israel took them both out militarily, and they've never been rebuilt since. So we're two for two on that. Now, this is a much bigger nuclear program. It's spread out. It's in a country that's vastly bigger. But Israel's also stronger today than it was, 30, 40 years ago. So keep that in mind.
Do you believe that the moment the country would launch any kind of degrading attack on the Iranian nuclear capacity, that Hezbollah would strike? So do you believe in a preemptive attack at Hezbollah would have to occur at the same time as a strike on Iran?
You can't rule it out. You can't rule it out. And there's a conventional wisdom here that says that Lebanon's morass, there's no food, there's no electricity, there's no gas, actually has a restraining effect on Hezbollah. I think it's just the opposite. I think the fact that we cannot bomb Lebanon back into the Stone Age because we're already in the Stone Age. And if we do bomb Lebanon, we basically Hezbollah controls Lebanon. So we'd be declaring war against Lebanon. The world community would come down on us like a ton of bricks that we're already causing, undue agony to a country that's already in undue agony. So I think that the Hezbollah may even think that the situation in Lebanon provides a shield for them and make them more sort of battle ready.
But what's interesting, Dr. Oren, is that in order to attack Iran, you have to attack Hezbollah. In order to attack Hezbollah, you have to mobilize. In order to mobilize, you have to let Iran know that something's coming. How in the world do you solve that triangle?
Well, first of all, I've long been critical of our attitude towards Hezbollah and even toward Hamas. And we basically play Iran's game. these are Iranian proxies.
Yes.
During the May fighting with Hamas, 95% of the rockets that were fired at us are actually made in Iran, and we fire back at Hamas. Why aren't we firing back at the country that's sending Hamas, the country that's sending Hezbollah? I think for every rocket that passes over our border, we should take out an oil refinery. I really do. And that should be the new calculus.
But isn't my problem your problem, which is they're going to know, you're going to telegraph the punch?
No, not at all. I think that the first punch would go against Iran, and then Hezbollah would have to decide whether they want to react or not.
But you're not mobilized.
Keep in mind, the major threat here is the nuclear threat. You know, Tom Friedman keeps on quoting some Israeli officer over and over again saying the major threat Israeli thinks is the missile threat. No, he wants to believe that because he wants to downplay the nuclear issue. That's Tom Friedman's agenda. The fact is, the thing that is the existential threat is the nuclear issue, is the nuclear bomb, the nuclear program. The missiles, okay. They've had 150,000 rockets. You know, there's some big rockets. We'll survive it. We've got great civil defense. We've got Iron Dome. We'll take care of it. But the major blow has to be against the nuclear program.
With that note, Michael Oren, thank you. Follow him at Dr. Michael Oren, Dr. Michael Oren over at Twitter. Dr. Michael Oren at Twitter. Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt, live inside the Beltway on this Thursday morning, the last day of September in the year of our Lord 2022. The headlines are all the same. From the Financial Times, Joe Biden locked in precarious talks to save landmark legislation. From the Wall Street Journal, infrastructure bill faces uncertain heading into planned House vote. From the Washington Post, Biden sticks to his deal-making strategy as some Democrats want him to do more to bring holdouts on board. Also in the Post, Biden, Pelosi embark on a late scramble to save $1 trillion infrastructure bill. From the New York Times, Democrats move to avert shutdown, but divisions imperil Biden's agenda. Joining me to discuss that agenda and its prospects in the House is Alfredo Ortiz. Alfredo is the president of the Job Creators Network. He's on a bus somewhere on the Job Creator Network bus tour, and you can find out where at jcnbustour.com. He and I are going to be joined by Brian Westbury in Atlanta on October 13th. You can go to am920theanswer.com to get tickets. Job Creators Network sponsors this show. They sponsor the October 13th event. We'll be joined, by the way, by Herschel Walker, who I believe will be the next senator from Georgia. Alfredo, where are you this morning?
I'm actually in Washington, D.C. I just got in.
Well, you got here in time for the big day. I actually believe that they will pass this infrastructure bill today. What do you think?
Well, I'm not sure, honestly, Hugh. I'm not sure Nancy's got the votes even for that smaller infrastructure bill, the $1 trillion one, let alone the $3.5 trillion, which, as you and I spoke last time, it really is like $5.5 trillion because they're just using accounting gimmicks to make it $3.5 trillion.
And it will be $7.5 trillion total because they already passed $2 trillion in January.
That's right.
So
that's right.
And that's on top of, I believe, $5 to $7 trillion spent last year. So we're talking about
it's unbelievable.
About $15 trillion in 18 months, which will have a massive inflationary effect. But let's focus on the infrastructure bill today. The squad swore they wouldn't vote for it. I think they're going to roll the squad. What do you think?
Well, I mean, it's, we kind of hope that they do because I think the squad needs to be squashed, to be quite honest. But I'll tell you, Hugh, what the Dems are doing to Manchin, I think is reprehensible. I mean, thank God that at least there's one adult in the room there. I would say to him, go ahead and leave your party, leave those Dems, go independent, and caucus with the Republicans because I think that's where we are with the state of affairs, and I think that's what the Dems deserve.
Well, Joe Manchin would easily win re-election as an independent Republican if he did that. I have seen most of the pressure for the $3.5 trillion applied to Kristen Sinema of Arizona. Now, if Sinema holds out and stands up to him, she not only is guaranteed re-election, she'll be on a national ticket someday. But if she folds up like a bad lawn chair, that's the end of her career. If she'll lose, I mean, everyone in Arizona is watching it. But they will both vote for the $1 trillion, right? Both Manchin and Sinema are on board, as are 18 Republicans on the first $1 trillion.
Yeah, it sounds about right. So, again, the only thing that's interesting, Hugh, is, I think if Nancy would have had the votes and the votes were all there, I think they would have already done that. So that's what I'm a little confused about. But that's why I'm here in D.C., because I'm here for this big day, of course, and we'll see how the rest of it pans out, of course.
Well, I want to break it down for the audience. There are two bills. The first bill is an infrastructure bill that the Senate already passed and sent over to the House. The hard left, led by this squad, Ilhan Omar, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Yes, please. It has
And
nothing to do with me.
yeah, and Rashida Tlaib and Alessa Presley. Those four, the squad, the hard left squad, they're opposed to the infrastructure bill because they want to use it. They're holding it hostage for the $3.5 trillion. But Nancy Pelosi promised so-called House liberals, moderates, there are no moderates in the Democratic Party, that she would give them a vote today. So, Alfredo, what do you hear? Are they actually going to get a vote today?
Well, I think they're going to get a vote today, but it will be interesting because I think the squad's going to hold true. I mean, I'm just not sure. I think if you talk to AOC and others, I truly believe that they think they have the steering wheel and not Nancy.
I think they get rolled. I think they'll end up crying on the floor like they did earlier this week. We will see. If it doesn't pass, will it pass next week?
I believe it'll pass next week, yes.
Yeah, so they'll put together, it won't pass today at worst. They'll put it together. They'll pretend to have rolled the squad. Then they'll resurrect it and smash it into $3.5 trillion, and they will have reached some kind of accommodation with Sinema and I'm very cynical. I think this is all a passion play for the benefit of the last independents who believe the Democrats about anything, Alfredo.
Yeah, absolutely right. And remember, too, we got the debt ceiling, that needs to be pushed past midnight tonight. So,
well, the continuing resolution will pass today. I think the debt ceiling, they've got to the middle of October, and they can amend the budget resolution in committee and then instruct the reconciliation instructions to include the $3.5 trillion plus the debt limit. It's all going to happen next week. Why do you think they're so intent on ginning up pressure, Alfredo, and ginning up attention? Because it's a pseudo drama. There is no drama here.
Yeah. Well, I think the Democrat Civil War is actually real because you have the progressives, or I call them the regresses, that are putting, the socialist agenda forth that they really want to get passed. And, the infrastructure was part of it. This $3.5 or $5.5 trillion bill is another one. But, when you add it all up, like you said, Hugh, we're talking over almost $12 trillion. I mean, there's no wonder that now, Jerome Powell was saying, oh, maybe this inflation is actually a little bit longer here than we thought, and it's not as transitory as we expected. Of course, you and I talked about that last time as well. You can't spend $12 trillion on an economy and not have inflation go up.
Yeah, understand at the beginning of this spending splurge, which was launched by COVID, and the original bill, the PPP, et cetera, were good bills. The national debt was $22 trillion. It's going to be at the end of that year $30 trillion or maybe $32 trillion. We've never done anything remotely like this. Not World War II, not World War I. We have never put this much money, printed this much money. And Alfredo, you've been out on the bus tour, Job Creator Network bus tour, jcnbustour.com. What are they telling you in the cities you visited about inflation?
Oh, they're just, it's killing our businesses. It's killing our small businesses in particular, Hugh. The labor, you had the labor shortage, first of all, so, labor costs going through the roof, but all of the inputs and the supply chain issues as well, Hugh, that's causing part of the inflation factors. Let's go back to why those, why we're having some of the supply chain issues, even internally, is because, for example, we don't have enough truckers, right? Because, of the labor shortage. So you can't move the stuff back and forth across the country. You don't have enough, machinists to actually work machines in manufacturing, locations, again, because of the labor shortage. And all that was caused by the Biden administration and, those ridiculous unemployment benefits that went above and beyond what was needed for the economy. That's why we have 30% savings rates still, which are record highs for our country.
Money sitting on the sidelines, not invested. And, of course, the 10-year Treasury has begun to rise, Alfredo. The 10-year Treasury, of course, drives housing prices everywhere. It's going to lock everyone out of the housing market. So when you ask people to join Job Creators Network, are they responding?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, Hugh. I mean, because, look, I mean, first of all, this war on small business launched by by Biden and the Democrats is real. And every single policy, Hugh, at this point that I've seen coming out of the Biden administration, not one of them is there to actually help small businesses. Everything that we've seen really is going to hurt our small businesses, from the pay-fors that they've laid out in terms of the tax increases, to our, most successful small businesses out there, to the C Corps, which are going to affect about 1 million small businesses out there, our larger employers of small businesses. And then, of course, you've got the vaccine mandate on top of all of this that he's trying to propose through OSHA, which, as you probably know, we've already announced that we are planning to sue OSHA and the Biden administration because of this mandate.
I hope you succeed. I want everyone in Atlanta. I've got a huge audience in Atlanta. My largest share is actually in San Francisco, which is a 12 share, but I have I think the largest or the second largest audience in Atlanta. Alfredo Ortiz and I and Brian Westbury, economist of the world, plus Herschel Walker, are coming to your city on October the 13th, am920theanswer.com. Go and get a ticket. We're going to walk through all this. We will know how the play ends by then. Alfredo, we're in our last minute. You're in D.C. today. Where do you go after this? Are you back on the bus?
Back on the bus. Yeah, we're next week. We're hitting South Carolina, North Carolina. I believe I'm trying to do a swing through. It looks like maybe even making it down to Florida. So we're trying to squeeze in an extra stop.
Everyone, check your JCN bustour.com, Job Creators Network bustour.com, jcnbustour.com. And then come to Atlanta. It's a ticketed event. They're selling out. am920theanswer.com. Herschel and Alfredo and Brian and me. am920theanswer.com on October 30th. Thank you, Alfredo Ortiz. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned to the Hugh Hewitt Show. And he joins me now. Hello, Adam. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
I hope this is the first of at least a dozen meetings, at least monthly, between now and when the votes are counted in Nevada. Adam, let's treat this as the first interview for many. I've got 400 affiliates. Last time we talked, it was probably half that number. Last time we talked, I wasn't on in Las Vegas. It's between 3 and 6 in the morning because it's a live show out there, so it's for the people leaving the Strip. But let's talk as though nobody has any idea that you're the grandson of Paul Laxalt, or who Paul Laxalt is, or who Adam Laxalt is. Give him some bio.
Great. Thank you so much, Hugh. Look, this is an incredibly important race. I think that what people are feeling in my home state and across the country is that our nation is being transformed before our very eyes. And you add all of the most recent catastrophic policy failures like Afghanistan and the impending $3.5 trillion bill, the inflation, all these things. I think people just have this palpable sense of concern, fear, anxiety. And so I have 3 small children, 8, 5, and 3. We are expecting our 4th child. We did not take this decision lightly. Politics, campaigns are just terrible business, and politics is very, very challenging these days. But I served in the Navy and served in Iraq in my 20s. I felt it was my duty to do that, and I feel very similar to subjecting my family to this business, that we have to step up. It's time for my generation to try to change the leadership that we have in this country and to try to stand for the values that made this the greatest country on earth. And so these are the things that we plan on talking about. And, my opponent is someone that just consistently stands with the left, someone that consistently refuses to stand up for our voters. Her number one constituent is Chuck Schumer, whom she votes with 99% of the time. And I think Nevadans are ready for a change. I think they want somebody that's going to represent them against this absolute abomination that we're seeing out of Washington right now.
Now, Adam Laxalt, when I say you'll be the 51st vote, I look at the math of the United States Senate and I think, okay, the Republicans are going to pick one up in New Hampshire if Governor Sununu runs, and we may lose one in either Ohio or Pennsylvania. We may win one in Georgia or Arizona. We may pick one up somewhere else, but we really got to have Nevada. We got to flip a seat somewhere other than New Hampshire in order to assure Republican control and therefore a check on President Biden's second 2 years. Cortez Masto, who is the incumbent, I wouldn't recognize her if she sat down next to me in a restaurant in D.C. That's not a knock on her. Maybe we don't go to the same restaurants. But she has not made a mark, as far as I can tell. She does not have a distinguished public policy background. I hope you debate her a lot, because your 8 years as Attorney General followed her tenure in the Attorney General's office. What did you find when you walked in on day one?
When I walked in after she had been the Attorney General of this state for 8 years, we invited in a nonpartisan, it's called the National AG Association group, to do an audit, and they said it was one of the worst-run offices they audited in the history of the program. I had received calls from judges, from lawyers, saying something has to get fixed. The office isn't respected anymore. It's not no talented lawyers or law enforcement are willing to work there. And so we needed to reshape the entire office. And I'm just incredibly proud of the work we were able to do to be able to actually make this a respected office, to make it the top law enforcement office of the state. You know, when I took over as AG, there was virtually no relationship with local law enforcement across the state. And we did something as simple as doing a law enforcement summit where we invited in the chiefs of every single county to join us twice a year. And every single time we did that, we were able to find ways to work with law enforcement and help our state. Things like elder abuse. We had the first elder abuse prosecution in the history of state. Things like our military, our veterans that had no legal services available to them. I recruited hundreds of private sector lawyers to work with our office and give pro bono service to our military. And this program, Hugh, became a DOD certified program that states were able to copy across America. And so I just give a few examples of things that, you know, when you have energy and you want to make a difference and you're able to recruit a good team, you could transform a culture instantly. And so, you know, we want to bring that to the Senate for this state. And I could tell you that you mentioned, you know, not being able to recognize her and then her having no impression. The same holds true here in Nevada. I ask every single room that I'm in front of, can anyone name a single thing that she's done for this state in 13 years in public office? And no one can name a single thing. And that's what I think is going to be a great contrast for us, is that we're going to go to work and we're going to make a difference. We're going to be a voice for everyday Nevadans that feel like they've been left behind. For many, many years in this state, we've been left behind. And I want to address one other thing. I mean, you mentioned this being the 51st state. You know, I think as people think about Nevada, we got the last two presidentials, and we're one of the last to report, and everybody's wondering if it's going to go for the Republicans, and we've lost the last two presidentials. So I think that's burned in people's minds. But I want your national audience to know that President Trump lost Nevada by 2 points in 2016. Catherine Masto won by 2 points in 2018, and Trump turned around. And while he did get the most votes of anyone ever running for president in the history of our state, he lost by 2 points. And so this is an incredibly close state, and we've never seen anything like we're experiencing now since, you know, maybe 2010, 2014, where everyday Nevadans are absolutely repulsed by the Biden administration and the leadership they're seeing in Washington. Our most recent poll had independents breaking for us by 12 points. It gives you an idea that people are ready for a change.
Now, Adam, I want to mention a few things. This is our first of many conversations. I did not know until fairly recently you're a devout Catholic. I did not know until fairly recently you've been sober since you were 18 years old and you're in recovery. I did not know until recently that your roommate at Officers Candidate School is a fella named DeSantis who's running a state down in Florida. I didn't know until recently why John Ralston, a fellow colleague who I get along with well, he's a political partisan pundit like I am, why he dislikes you so much, and he shouldn't be held out as objective. He's already told me that you're disqualified because you did the Al Gore thing and used legal methods to challenge making sure that every vote counted in Nevada in 2020. So it is a machine state with everybody on somebody's payroll and the unions out there to get you. What's the website people need to go to? How do they get involved? And especially for my audience in Reno, my audience in Las Vegas, my audience in Las Vegas, city of North Las Vegas, how do they get involved? Adam Laxalt.
AdamLaxalt.com, as easy as it can get. And, we're also kicking off a statewide tour. We're going to do every single county starting this Friday. I cannot wait to get out there. And, people are ready. People are fired up. People are ready for a change. And we hope to be a generational conservative candidate that is going to inspire our voters.
Well, you're a fusion candidate. There's an establishment GOP, and it would be your grandfather is about as establishment as it gets. And then there's a Trump GOP, and you appeal to both of them. I think that's why you scare Ralston and everybody else so much, is that every Republican likes you and most of the independents.
Well, look, it's important that we're able to bring people together to win this kind of a race against an incumbent. I will say, for my grandfather, as you may remember, I mean, he was the head of the Reagan Revolution.
Yep.
They were the conservatives that spent every waking day of their lives trying to convert our party into a party that actually represented the working class, blue collar. I saw this video from 1981 where he said, we have to stop being the country club party. And he was right then. That advice is still correct today. And that's something that President Trump absolutely got right. We have to represent ordinary people. We've done a great job of moving Hispanics in this state. The president got over 40% here in Nevada because they understand that we are the party of the working class. We are the party of the American dream. We're the party that wants to not support things like the $3.5 trillion bill that is a liberal socialist dream that is going to give us more government, make it harder for small businesses, make it harder for people to succeed, increase inflation, all of these things that your listeners probably know. And so it's important that we make this contrast as stark as it is today, and I think our voters are ready for it.
They are, and I want everyone in the country, from north to south, from Washington State to Florida, from Maine to California, to go to AdamLaxalt.com, get involved. This is a national race. All the national groups are going to play. Be a national volunteer. You can volunteer from out of state. Get on the rolls. And if you know anyone in Nevada, tell them right now is the time to get involved with AdamLaxalt.com. Adam, come back early and often. I always enjoy talking to you. Thanks for your service as well. And I look forward to chatting with you at least monthly between now and November 2022.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Be well. Now, some of you are wondering, if you were watching on YouTube or on Rumble, why did Hugh change from his blue pinstripe uniform to a black golf shirt? I did not spill coffee on myself. No, I'm preemptively saying I did not spill coffee. And so I'm just saying that. No one think that I spilled coffee. Simply not true.
That's what everybody thinks.
Yeah, that's not true. It's not true. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Former Senator Jim Talent from the great state of Missouri is with the Bipartisan Policy Center. He joins me this morning. Jim, good morning. The newspapers are full of contrived drama. Will the government shut down? Will the stimulus bill pass? Will the $3.5 trillion social infrastructure bill pass? What will happen to the squad? What about Kristen Sinema? What about Joe Manchin? Here's what my prediction is. Everything passes and they spend all the money after pretend drama. What do you think?
Well, if I had to guess from the outside, and you don't really know, the best intel is the people managing the whip teams, obviously. And it's possible they don't know. But my guess is the Democrats are not going to leave that $1.2 trillion infrastructure money on the table, that they'll pass that at some point. I've always been skeptical that they could get another big reconciliation bill through the Senate. I don't think I don't think it's just Manchin. I think there's a half a dozen Democrats who would prefer not to vote on something like particularly the tax increases. But we will see. They're going to have difficulty, I think, getting a debt limit increase eventually through the Senate because Schumer did not put the instructions for one in the last budget resolution. And so far, McConnell's saying, I'm not going to finance, your deficit spending.
They've got to go back and. Were you on the budget committee, Jim? Were you on the budget committee?
No, please. I always avoided that.
Well, I think they've got to go back and amend the budget resolution to add reconciliation instructions. It takes 2 weeks. They better get started.
Exactly, and that's the point. And McConnell's been saying this for months. He's the best Republican leader since Dole, in my opinion.
100%.
Yeah, and he's been saying for months, look, we're not going to finance this enormous deficit spending. You're going to have to do it, and yet Schumer did not put the instructions in the last budget resolution. So you're right, it takes a couple of weeks, and I don't know that Schumer's really faced up to that yet. I think I've thought for months, Hugh, that the infrastructure bill would eventually pass. The House would take what the Senate gives them, just as they did in 2009. This is galling to the House, and not just because the progressives don't like it because it's not big enough. It's galling to sit there in the House and have the Senate serve you a bill and say, no, we're not going to conference. This is our bill. You take it or leave it. But they passed Obamacare on that basis, and I think they'll pass the infrastructure bill. That's my guess.
That requires that the squad swallow their pride and get rolled.
They climb down, yes.
Yeah, that they climb down. And I am betting that they climb down. And just like they did on Iron Dome. I will have tears and wailing, and in the end, they will actually just be politicians.
And this idea they're going to negotiate with individual senators, this has been going on for a long time, and they're not going to get individual senators say, oh, yeah, we're going to give you what. Manchin's not going to do that. So this is my guess. But what I don't know is the behind-the-scenes pressure being put by the different interest groups, because I'm not there anymore. There are some things you really only know by going out and talking to people day after day. You have to see how they're moving and what they're thinking. That's what I used to do when I was on the whip team. I would talk like every few days to the people that I knew were going to be in the middle, and you get a feel for what they're eventually going to do.
Well, Senator, I believe that if Kristen Sinema stands strong against the $3.5 trillion and says no, that she's elected for life and will be on a national ticket someday. I believe that will empower her as a genuine moderate Democrat. And if Joe Manchin, if they jam him too hard, he could flip. He's not really a Republican, but he could be the most liberal Republican in the caucus, and they'd probably give him the chairmanship of anything he wanted. Am I right?
Well, they certainly would be willing to make some kind of a deal like that. They protect his seniority. Even he wouldn't have to go in as a freshman, and there's a lot of precedent for that. Yeah, you know what? Doing what you think is right is actually not a bad thing to do politically.
And it's not bad for Sinema to go to the White House and be yammered at by the president forever. She just keeps going. She went 3 times yesterday. Did that ever happen to you, Jim Talent?
Yeah, sometimes. You can't really say no to going to see the president, but you just keep telling the president the same thing, what you're going to do and why. I've been skeptical, that they would get another big reconciliation bill through the Senate, and I don't think it's just Manchin and Sinema. I think there are others that do not want to have to vote, particularly on the tax increase provisions.
Lips.
It's one thing to pass a budget resolution with this big number in it. It's another thing to vote for the underlying bills that raise people's taxes in the way that they've been talking about doing.
From your lips to God ears, Jim Talent. Follow Jim on Twitter at Jim Talent. Thank you, sir. Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings to everyone in the United States. One of my favorite guests, Senator James Lankford from Oklahoma, joins me. I love Senator Lankford because of his voice. I love his family. I love the fact that for years he ran Falls Creek Youth Camp in Oklahoma, so he knows basically everyone who's anyone in Oklahoma and went to church camp ever. Good morning, Senator. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Good morning to you as well.
Well, Senator, I am curious. You're on finance. You're one of the guys who you're the taxpayer's friend, according to the National Taxpayers Union. You know what's going on. The reconciliation instruction didn't include an instruction to raise the debt limit. So I think they have to amend the budget resolution. I think it's got to go through you. Where are we on all of the $5 trillion in two chunks that the Democrats want to pass this week?
So obviously they're stuck. This is a fight between the left and the far left, and they're not really willing to have any conversations with us at all as they're trying to figure out how far they can go. And you've got some folks on the left saying, are we crazy? This is another $5 trillion that we're trying to be able to put down after we put $2 trillion down earlier this year. And there are some folks saying we need to stop and think about this. It's Joe Manchin, it's multiple others that are on the Democrat side, and then there's the far left saying, oh no, this is our moment to make history. We want to be FDR-like. We want to be the historic Congress that made the biggest entitlement program ever, and so it's our moment in the sun to go do all of this. So that's the big fight right now, and there's quite a few folks that are in the mix that are on the left that are really duking it out. And quite frankly, the taxpayers and our economy are the ones sitting there saying, when are you guys going to just wake up to the fact that we don't need to do this? With the economy as precarious as it is right now, with employment and all the issues that are there, dumping another $3 to $5 trillion more in entitlements will make it worse.
Now, Senator, I really appreciate when you come on because you do have the gift of explaining complex things. I mean, you worked with teenagers for how long did you run Falls Creek for?
15 years.
Okay, so you're used to breaking it down for teenagers, so I want you to break it down for the Steelers fans who are listening and everyone who's listening. We spent a lot of money in 2020 on COVID, and that was bipartisan. It was necessary.
Right.
I think it was $4 trillion. Was it $5 trillion last year?
It was a little over $3.5.
$3.5 trillion. So that was last year. We've spent $2 trillion this year. That's $5 trillion. So the Democrats want to double the amount of money we've already printed. That's $10 trillion in 2 years. Would you explain to the audience why that's a terrible idea?
Oh, it's a terrible idea because it obviously causes inflation. We've already watched what happened when we were coming out of all the pandemic earlier this year, when they dumped $2 trillion on the economy at that moment as the economy was rising. It's caused all this inflation. It's caused all the problems that we have in employment across the country. You can't dump $2 trillion into an economy and tell people to start spending, disincentivize work at the same time, which breaks down the supply chain that's all over the country. You can't do that at the same time and not have inflation like what we have right now. It's just basic economics. So for many of us, we look at this and say, why are you looking at $3.5 trillion at least in new entitlements? To give you just a picture of what they're trying to add on top of the entitlements the federal government already has, if you add up the total budget from every state in America, all 50 states, their total budget is $2 trillion a year. They want to do $3.5 trillion of new entitlements on top of all those things, on top of the entitlements we already have. It will absolutely break down our system. And so that's why many of us are worried about this, because it'll cause prices to continue to rise, and it'll cause employment numbers to continue to be more and more challenging.
So, Senator Lankford, they're working over Senator Sinema. Tough. She's a colleague of yours. I know you get along with the Democrats very well, and I appreciate that. I approve of that. You and Senator Scott work hard to make sure that people stay civil and in conversation with each other. Poor Kristen Sinema, I thought I'd never say that, but she had to go down to the White House for 3 treatments yesterday. I mean, they worked her over 3 times. I don't even know what's going on to Joe Manchin. Are they buckling?
So far, I've not seen him buckling. In fact, Joe Manchin actually sent the message out yesterday saying, what are we thinking, Democrats? Everybody needs to slow down and be able to take a look at what's really going on with this, that this is fiscal insanity. He's not wrong on that. Now, he's saying, let's keep talking, let's keep working, maybe we can get a slightly smaller package. I have to tell you, by the way, $1 trillion is a big number. If they take it from $3 trillion to $2 trillion, that is still an enormous amount of money. And on all of those things, it's not the cost, as my friend Tim Scott says. It's not the cost, it's the content. The cost is bad, but the content is even worse. The social entitlements, all the things that they're pouring on the economy, the tax treatments, the IRS tracking all of our bank activity, all of those things, that's the worst part of it. So they can do a smaller length of bad, and it's still really bad. And so I would encourage people not to get caught up in the, $2 trillion is better than $3.5 trillion. It's not necessarily so. If they take it, let's say they do 5 years worth of $3.5 trillion in spending, and then they take it to 2.5 years and say, well, look, isn't it so much cheaper? The same bad policy is there that they're trying to be able to put in place to be able to have something that's extended out past this time. That's going to be a real problem.
Earlier this week, I want to compliment you on going to the floor to not talk about the headlines, but to actually speak about an important subject, the dignity of work. Why did you do that? What did you see? You can't reproduce the speech. People can go look it up online. James Lankford, Oklahoma, dignity of work. Why did you do that?
Because what the Democrats are proposing in this $3.5 trillion package goes directly at the American dream, goes directly at individuals and who we are as Americans. I think their work has incredible dignity in all levels. There was a famous speech from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We talked about the dignity of work of individuals. It was to incentivize people to be able to step away from government benefits, to use government benefits, as Jack Kemp used to talk about, as the trampoline, not the hammock, and to be able to step out of that and to be able to say, what can we do to help people go through the safety net and get out? What Democrats are doing are disincentivizing work that actually destroys families long term. You and I have talked about this before. I come from a biblical worldview. Work is over and over again encouraged in Scripture, but it also gives purpose and meaning to people when they actually work. When people don't work, they can't answer the most basic question of our society: what do you do? And if you can't answer that question, it is demeaning to you, to your children, to your grandchildren. It sets a bad example, and it breaks down our economy. So culturally, it's bad for individuals and for families. Economically, it's bad for individuals. We need to incentivize work. And if you go back to even Bill Clinton in his famous speeches about we're ending welfare as we know it, literally Democrats in this generation are saying we want to go back to welfare as we knew it and do that again. What in the 1990s they said was a failed experiment of just sending checks out to people thinking that's going to end poverty. Now Joe Biden is standing up and saying we're going to end childhood poverty by mailing checks to people. That doesn't end childhood poverty. We all know, and we have seen it through history, that it actually perpetuates generational poverty. We need to encourage people to lift out of it.
Now, I also want to pause on your colleague, Ron Wyden. I'm sure he's a nice guy from Oregon. He is on a campaign to do away with stepped-up basis. Now, that's a little complicated for the Steelers fans, but basically it means that anyone who bought a house and saved 30 years to pay it off is going to get screwed if they live on the coast. Every family farm in Oklahoma, every small oil or natural gas producer, every car wash, every restaurant that descends to kids will be considered valued at the time that it was originally purchased. It will wipe out generations of small businesses and the savings of families. Did the Finance Committee agree on that? I mean, did that get the conversation it deserved, Senator?
Oh, no. It hasn't had any Finance Committee real conversation. There are a few things that have been discussed on things like energy policy where there was very strong pushback. But this whole issue of stepped-up basis, you put it in a capsule really well. If you wanted to put it in the most basic thing for the family farm, where a family farm was purchased generations ago, they look at the value of it 40 years ago, let's say, when a farmer took over that from his dad or his mom, and he's passing it on to their kids. That family farm, that land, those tractors, those barns, all of that equipment has accrued tremendous gain over the course of that 40 years. What they want to do is when that farm is passed on to the next generation, they have to pay the taxes on the increase of that in 40 years. That's not liquid. That's in the land. That's in the equipment itself. They will literally have to sell the family farm to be able to pay the taxes, which means that land will probably go into corporate ownership or whatever it may be in the area, and it causes a tremendous stir in agriculture production across the country and for families. Take that to every family business. When it's passed on to the next generation, it just destroys that family because they have to then sell mom and dad's business to be able to pay the taxes on it. Why in the world would we want to have Uncle Sam hovering over the coffin of every American saying, I'm ready for my cut, no matter what it does to the family?
We have less than a minute. Senator Lankford, you know Ron Wyden. He knows what it's going to do. Why do they want to do this to people? It's ruinous. It's destructive.
It is ruinous and destructive. Well, there's two things on the far left, and I would tell you I was pretty shocked by this. There are folks on the far left, and I don't know if this is where Ron Wyden is. He and I have not had this blunt of a conversation, but I've heard multiple folks on the far left here in the Senate that have said they're really disturbed about families having wealth and passing it on. They want to move that wealth around in the economy, and that families don't need to cheat Uncle Sam by passing it on to the next generation. I look at this and say that is a great treasure and encouragement. I want to encourage every family to be able to own wealth, to be able to pass on to the next generation that is beneficial for those families, not detrimental to our economy.
Jim Lankford, keep fighting the good fight. The senator from Oklahoma. Look him up on the web. Support him. James Lankford, a voice for the taxpayer from Oklahoma. I'll be right back, America, on The Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, joined by United States Senator Tom Cotton from the state of Arkansas. Arkansas is in the top 10 for the first time in my memory. Good morning, Senator, and congratulations on the Razorbacks' rise.
Good morning, Hugh. Thank you. It's nice for you to be able to congratulate the Razorbacks once, as opposed to
the Buckeyes will
celebrating the Buckeyes' victory.
Yeah, once in a while we'll get there. Hey, what is going on in Massachusetts this morning?
Hugh, you're aware of the phenomenon that I call the Soros prosecutors. George
Yes.
Soros and other left-wing activists have helped elect radical pro-criminal prosecutors across the country, like Larry Krasner in Philadelphia and Chesa Boudin in San Francisco. Another one is Rachel Rollins in Suffolk County. Rachel Rollins has now been nominated by Joe Biden to be the U.S. Attorney for Massachusetts. This is a woman, Hugh, who has ruled an entire category of crimes as presumptively off limits for prosecution unless her assistant DAs seek higher supervisor approval. And Hugh, these are not crimes like jaywalking. I'm talking about breaking and entering, malicious destruction of property, drug trafficking, including fentanyl. And it's not surprising that over the last nearly 3 years since he took office, that murder and crime has spiked in Boston. And moreover, Hugh, she lacks the temperament to hold the office of U.S. Attorney. She has said that she wants to destroy the criminal justice system from the inside. She had said that she's going to go to war with the U.S. Attorney's Office as a DA in Suffolk County on things like opioids and immigration. And last Christmas Eve, Hugh, she had a road rage incident at a mall with a local citizen because she wanted to merge into the traffic lane first. So she rolled down her window, threatened her, turned on her police lights, and warned that she was going to give her a ticket.
Huh?
Now, Hugh, I will tell you that it is unusual. It's not unprecedented. It's unusual to have recorded votes on U.S. attorneys. But if Joe Biden is going to start elevating these Soros prosecutors like Rachel Rollins and Larry Krasner and Chesa Boudin to U.S. attorneys, I can assure you that we won't just have recorded votes, but that Republicans will oppose these nominees and make it plain to the American people that the Democrats are elevating radical pro-crime prosecutors into these very important offices.
You know, yesterday, Senator Cotton, I asked the audience why they thought the United States experienced a 30% rise in murders from 2019 to 2020. 30% in murders, 21,000 murders. A lot of it has to do with lawlessness that is being decriminalized, leading to lawlessness at a higher level. No one has decriminalized murder, but a lot of people are walking away from minor crimes with no bail, walking away without being charged. It's all cumulative. It's the broken windows theory.
And Hugh, that's right. In Suffolk County, under Rachel Rollins' tenure as district attorney, is a perfect example of that. Her logic for refusing to prosecute crimes like drug trafficking, Hugh, not drug possession, drug trafficking, and breaking and entering, and malicious destruction of property, is that if you don't prosecute those crimes, then when the criminals commit more serious crimes in the future, they won't face such long jail sentences. I'm not making that up, Hugh. That's part of her logic.
Will Elizabeth Warren and Ed Markey actually sit down and introduce her to the committee? You're on Judiciary. Do you expect them to actually do that?
I don't know if they plan to do that, Hugh. Again, typically, we don't even have hearings for U.S. attorneys or recorded votes. So this is a rare moment on the Judiciary Committee. But you know what's also rare, Hugh? Nominating a woman to be the U.S. attorney who said she wanted to go to war with the U.S. Attorney's Office and destroy the criminal justice system from the inside.
Well, good luck with that. You may have to use your hold. Let me ask you about Secretary Austin, General Milley, and General McKenzie. We have had 2 days of hearings. I've played a lot of it. At the end of those 2 days, what's your estimate of that trio and what happened in Afghanistan?
Well, they pulled back the curtain on Joe Biden's terribly flawed withdrawal from Afghanistan and exposed his lies to the American people. As they said under questioning from me on Tuesday, all three of them, and Scott Miller, the commander on the ground in Afghanistan, a legend in the Special Forces community, former commander of JSOC, a man who spent almost half of the 20-year war in Afghanistan on the ground in Afghanistan. All four of them recommended that the president keep a small troop presence in Afghanistan to prevent the exact kind of debacle that we saw. Joe Biden went on George Stephanopoulos' show last month, and this is the same Joe Biden that in April and May was all chesty and swaggering about how he had rejected the general's advice, just like he had done in 2009. That he was the only one shrewd and tough enough not to be boxed in by the generals. But then when things went to hell in a handbasket in August, like, nope, no generals ever told me this. Yep. Another point, Hugh, that we learned is that Joe Biden has been telling everyone, well, all the generals said at the end that we had to get out by August 31st. Unanimous recommendation, 31st deadline after Kabul fell. Well, General Milley testified under my questioning that they weren't even asked their opinion of that until August 25th. August 25th, 5 days before the withdrawal. Might have been a little different if Joe Biden and his White House officials had said on August 15th, the moment Kabul fell, like, holy smokes, we got to do something to get our people out. Generals, what do you think? Or if they just followed what Lloyd Austin testified, that they started making plans for evacuations as early as April and May, yet the State Department and the White House continued to put them off and refused to let them execute it. That's why we had people calling our office, Hugh, after August 15th and said, hey, I'm here in Afghanistan, I'm stuck now. I had tickets to fly out on August 20th or August 28th or September 7th because they believed what Joe Biden had said about the government remaining in place and the security forces remaining in place.
Well, Senator, I watched as well. Our friend Mike Gallagher asked General McKenzie yesterday whether or not the attack on Forward Operating Base Chapman in March was a violation of Doha. General McKenzie paused for a long time and then said bluntly, no, I do not believe that's correct. 7 Americans were wounded in an attack directed at an American facility. I believe the Doha agreement was off from that moment going forward. Do you believe there was any intention ever to enforce the conditions of the Doha agreement by President Biden?
No, not at all, Hugh. And General Milley also testified to the Senate that putting aside the question of violence against American troops, the Taliban never fully honored a single other term or condition of that agreement. Joe Biden made it clear from the very beginning that he was going to withdraw from Afghanistan no matter what, with total disregard for the likely consequences and the advice of his senior commanders. And this is the one case in which President Biden said, well, Donald Trump had a policy and agreement. I can't do anything about it. If only he had shown such deference to President Trump's Remain in Mexico agreement with the Mexican government or safe third country agreements with Central American countries. If only he had followed that lead on the Paris Climate Accord with the Iran nuclear deal, we'd be in a much better position than we are today. And if he had taken his terms and conditions of the Doha agreement and held the Taliban's feet to the fire, we'd be in a different position in Afghanistan as well. We wouldn't have thousands of people left behind Taliban lines.
There are still American citizens trying to get out. There are still green card holders trying to get out. I know your office remains deeply involved in that. Senator, I don't know how we overcome the embarrassment of this, but I don't think we ever do without an accounting. 2 days of hearings did not answer questions. We still don't have a chronology. We still do not have any idea why the Taliban got control of Kabul. General McKenzie said he didn't negotiate that. Maybe check with the special representative. Are you going to have the special representative come over and talk to you as well?
We are going to have more hearings on this topic. We're not going to let it go. Even the Democrats, as you saw in their questioning, have some skepticism about the way the administration handled this withdrawal. So this was just the start of a series of hearings, not the conclusion.
All right, then, Senator, very quickly, we've got a vote today in the House. I expect the squad to roll over and pass $1 trillion. Then next week, they're going to try and pass $3.5 trillion. What do you hear from your colleagues who are trying to stand with the Republicans against this avalanche of fake money?
Hugh, I wouldn't be so sure about that in the House. Nancy Pelosi has this puffed-up reputation as a legislative maestro who always has a plan. In reality, Hugh, she's just been stumbling from one deadline of her own making to one crisis of her own creation, trying to juggle all the balls and keep them in the air day to day. I think today may be the day they all collapse, though. And the reason they'll collapse is because the Democrats are in total disarray, and they're in a circular firing squad as Joe Biden's poll numbers plummet and the American people begin to realize just how badly another $5 trillion of tax spending would impact their kitchen table issues.
Oh, I hope you're right. I do believe they are falling apart nationally. I think Glenn Youngkin's going to win over in Virginia. Did you happen to hear, I want to play for you, Terry McAuliffe talking about schools. I wonder how this would play in Arkansas, cut number 33.
I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
How would that go over in Arkansas, Senator Cotton?
Hugh, I did hear it, and at first I didn't believe it. So I hit rewind, and I listened to it again, and I just was astonished. I looked at my wife and said, this race is over.
Yeah.
And, I know that Glenn has already started to run ads about this, and he should. This is, I'd say, the closing issue in this campaign. After Virginia schools have been closed and on remote learning and had masks slapped on 3-year-olds over the last year and a half, for Terry McAuliffe to say that parents shouldn't have a say in their kids' education is the perfect issue on which Glenn Youngkin is going to close and win this race. That he will respect parents' rights.
The short version of this is shut up, parents. But once again, cut 33.
I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
You know, I'm not going to play anymore Terry McAuliffe saying nice things about me because he did that. Senator Cotton, very, very last question. When the $3.5 trillion comes up, it has to go to the Budget Committee first, right?
Yes, Hugh, the Budget Committee, although the Budget Committee largely plays a pro forma role, it's primarily the other committees that will be drafting that legislation. But, you know, in the Senate, they may not even want to have committee hearings because the committees are evenly divided and it's hard for them to move legislation. They may just take whatever gets cooked up in the House of Representatives. But, again, we don't know when that's going to happen. I mean, if Nancy Pelosi loses the vote on the infrastructure bill or pulls that bill today, she might as well just hand the gavel over to Speaker Bernie, since it's clear that the radical left is in charge of the House.
Well said. Senator Tom Cotton, always a pleasure. Follow him on Twitter at SendTomCotton. Follow me, America.